Have you ever found yourself just lost? I mean, turned around. I mean, it happens most often with most of you when you're in a big parking lot and you can't remember where you put your car. Like, where is it? I don't know where it is. Maybe you've been going somewhere out in a remote area. You're in, Rocky Point somewhere and you get turned around. You're like, I don't know which way back to the interstate. You got lost. You can't find yourself. This has happened to me a couple of times. And there's kind of different ways of being lost, I've learned. This is a way that I learned about this trip. So it was several years ago. I think it was like 2017. My buddies and I from college, there's a group of 5 of us, and we love to do all kinds of trips together. We go camping with our families. It's a really cool relationship we have. But one year, we went to the Roanoke River. And the Roanoke River is one of the major rivers in North Carolina. It's in the northern part of our state where a lot of us have some roots. And down the Roanoke River, they have this really cool series of camping platforms. So you can get in a canoe. You can go down the river. I think we canoed something like 20 or 30 miles over the course of 2 days. And along the way, there are these like platforms that this organization has built. Imagine a deck or a pier or something, but it's just out in the middle of nowhere. So you'll paddle like 5, 8, 10 miles out to the middle of nowhere, and then in the brush there, boom, there's this platform. You can set up your tent. You can camp there. It's pretty cool. So we went for, we've done it a couple times. We went for a 2 or 3 night trip this one time, and we get out, we do the first night. It's great. The second night, we're going to a platform we've never been to before. So we get up early that morning, and we start paddling. Now, we had a map of the area, but this is before, like, we didn't have a really good visual, like, satellite image of it or anything. It was kind of a hand-drawn map, and it was like, the river does this, and like right here is your platform. So it's not very accurate. So we're paddling. We do some estimates. We're like, it should take us like an hour to get there. It shouldn't be that far, right? We're paddling. My arms are starting to burn. My shoulders are getting tired. I'm sunburned. It's like Memorial Day week. We're paddling like, where is this platform? We can't find it. Maybe it's around the next bend. So you go around the next bend. It doesn't look like this is it. Maybe it's around the next bend. It doesn't look like this is it. Pretty soon we're like, did we pass it? What? I got to explain to you how remote this is, because you would park your car, you would get in the river, and you would just begin to paddle downstream towards the Atlantic Ocean. So we're realizing like the only way to get somewhere is either to find this platform, or I guess we just go to the ocean, or you got to go backwards against the stream. We're paddling. We could not find this platform. I want to pause us there, lost. There's lots of different ways to be lost. And I learned that there's one way to be lost, and that involves like, I know where I am. I just don't know how to get to where I want to be. And that's a really big distinction about a type of way of being lost. I knew I was in the Roanoke River. I knew that if I sat here long enough, we'd end up in the Atlantic Ocean. I knew that if I went like that way, I'd eventually get through some swamp and find probably a highway or a farm. But that's not where I wanted to be in none of those places. There was a specific platform that we had reserved and paid money for, and we wanted to be there. Have you ever just been lost? If someone could just show me the way. So we're picking up in our series today called Living Water. This has been a study through the book of John, the Gospel of John. If you got your Bible, go ahead and grab that thing. We're going to be in the Gospel of John, which is one of the 4 biographies of the life of Jesus in the New Testament of the Bible. You got Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And we've been studying through John for several weeks now. I think this is like week 7. And all throughout the study, we're finding that Jesus is making these profound claims about who he is. Through the book of John, there are 7 different times where he makes what we call an I am statement. He says things like, I am the good shepherd. I am, last week before our Serve Together Sunday, Perry preached, and he said, I am the resurrection and the life. And these statements are profound, and they're really challenging to the people. He says, I am the bread of life. I am the living water. We're going to get to another one of those phrases today, and we're going to be in chapter 14. So grab your Bibles, turn to chapter 14. Let me give you just a little bit of background before we jump into this teaching that Jesus is doing to his disciples. So this is kind of Jesus' last couple of days in his earthly ministry. He's been traveling for 3.5 years. He's collected quite a following. He's got these inner circle of disciples that he's teaching. And it's now the week of Passover, which is a Jewish holiday, and they've gathered in Jerusalem, and they're sitting around a table, and they're sharing a meal, a very traditional meal together. And this is that kind of scene that you talk about around Easter. And he's starting to explain to them what's about to go down, like I'm about to be giving my life up. And they don't fully understand what he's saying, but they're starting to feel the heaviness of this thing as our teacher, our friend, our Lord. Is he going to leave us? Is he going to die? Are people going to hurt him? So there's this pressure there in the moment, not understanding what's coming up. And so as Jesus starts in chapter 14, these first couple of sentences make sense. We're in chapter 14, starting at verse 1. We'll just look at the first 4 verses to start with. He says to them, don't let your hearts be troubled. Try to comfort them. You believe in God. Believe also in me. My Father's house has many rooms. If that were not so, would I have told you that I am going there to prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back, and I'll take you to be with me, that you also may be where I am. You know the way to the place where I'm going. Does anyone else just love sleeping in their own bed? Whew, the older I get, the more I love it. I'm 43 years old now. I'm telling you what, there's few places in this world that I'd rather be than my bed or my couch. I love to travel too, though. The last couple of weeks, I think in the last 14 days, I think I've spent like 5 or 6 nights in a different bed other than my bed. Done a lot of traveling. We did some traveling with the family. Last week I was up speaking at a summer camp in near Richmond, Virginia. And so all those nights I stayed in a different bed. And I love getting back to my house. There's a comfort there, right? As the smells are the same. The pillow is right. The blanket is right. You can be in charge of the temperature. You're with the people that you like to be with. And so maybe you've been there and you've been far away from home. You're like, I just want to go home. I think it's cool that Jesus uses this imagery of, I am going to prepare a place for you in my Father's house. There's this home, idea to it. It's a comfortable place. It's a place where I feel welcome, a place that I'm going to call my home. And this is something that would have been very familiar to the disciples in this time in Jewish culture. This is a type of thing that would happen when a man was going to marry a woman. They would betroth in marriage, they'd get engaged. And before the marriage ceremony would actually happen, very often what would happen is the man, the groom, would go back to his father's house and he would prepare a room for them to live in. And so depending on how wealthy you are and what kind of land you own, you might just go and it might literally be a room. Your mom and dad have a house, and in the first couple years of marriage, we're going to go live in this extra room. This is our guest room, and we're going to live there because that's how the culture worked. Or maybe if you had a little extra money, maybe you might build a room on to the house, and this is kind of our half of the house. Or maybe if you had a little extra resources, you might build on your father's property. But the whole idea is when we have this union, when we become husband and wife, you are now going to be officially part of my Father's family. So this is the imagery that Jesus is kind of talking about in this very somber moment in the Last Supper, and he's about to give his life, and he says, listen, I want you to know, you don't have to be worried. Everything sounds scary right now, but I'm going to go make a place for you in my Father's house. And the deal was the groom would go off, he'd make the house, and then he would come back and get his bride. That would be a weird wedding if you just didn't come get your wife, right? I've prepared this place. Why? So we can be together, and we can have a new reality together. So this is the imagery that Jesus is borrowing from. And he says this phrase at the end. He's like, and you know the place where I'm going. So Thomas speaks up. In verse 5, Thomas says, Lord, we don't know where you're going. So how can we know the way? Thomas gets a bad rap. Can somebody tell me, historically, Thomas has a nickname? What's Thomas's nickname? Anybody know? Doubting Thomas, or the doubter. He gets a bad rap because later on Jesus is going to do this insanely crazy thing. He's going to die and then he's going to raise from the dead, okay? And then that's insane. Has that ever happened to you? You have a loved one that passed away and then they raise from the dead? No, it hasn't. It hasn't. And not miraculously. But, and so this thing happens and Jesus begins to appear to some of the other disciples, and Thomas wasn't there when it happened the first time. And they're like, dude, Jesus was here. And he's like, you're lying. You're lying. And he's like, no, I'm telling you, he was here. And so he's like, I won't believe it until I see it with my own eyes. I touch him with my own hands. And then later Jesus does this amazing thing. He phases through a door. He walks into this room, the door's locked. He walks in there and Thomas is like, oh, my bad. Yeah, you really are. And he touches Jesus and he's with him. They share a meal together. And so Thomas historically gets this bad rap for being like doubter Thomas. I mean, you would have doubted him too, right? That's like a ridiculous thing to believe, that this guy who you saw die, we put him in a grave, he came back. What we really see Thomas doing a lot of other times, if you ever see his name somewhere else, he's actually doing something pretty impressive. He's normally doing something bold. He's normally stepping up and filling a gap. So we don't have a lot about him, but he's actually pretty bold and pretty wise in the things that he says a lot of times. And so Thomas speaks up in verse 5 and is like, you say that we know the way to the place where you're going, but we don't know the way. You're being really cryptic, Jesus. What do you mean you know the place where I'm going? So then Jesus answers in classic Jesus fashion, even more cryptic, but time will tell. This is maybe the most profound thing Jesus ever said. Did you hear what I just said? Maybe the most profound thing Jesus ever said. We're about to read it. So make sure you read this. Jesus answers him, oh, I am the way. Paul's there. Thomas says, you're going to some place. We don't know where you're going. How will we know the way? Jesus is like, oh, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Now, this is a phrase that we've talked about several times, and it's like this very absolute phrase that Christians hang on to. There's a lot of debate among world religions and other worldviews, like, what's this guy get off saying he's the only way to the Father? And so we could talk a lot about Jesus being the only way, and I'm going to talk about that in just a minute, but I want to zoom in on just one word here, because I think it goes back to this idea of him preparing a place. And it also really clarifies the idea of how he is the only way. The one word I want to look at is the word Father. Jesus doesn't say, I'm the only way to a good life. He doesn't say, I'm the only way to heaven. He's specific, and those things are, I think, true. He says, I'm the only way to the Father. And he uses this word very intentionally, and I want to zoom in on that because of the way that he says it. In Jesus' world, if anyone's talking about God, they're probably not going to call him Father. Not that no one ever did that. But most often, he would be called Creator, or he would be called Ruler of the universe, or he would be called Judge, or he would be called Most High. These are very lofty and big titles. These are pointing to like his bigness. The holy, untouchable God. Standing in fire on a mountain or something. Moses goes to call on the name of God one time, way back in the book of Exodus. This is thousands of years earlier. And he says to God, like, please let me see your face. I want to see you, God. And God says to Moses, no one can see me and live. And so there's this idea that God's presence and his sovereignty and his holiness is so big and so magnanimous that it just can't be approached. It can't be touched. You don't just walk up to God. In this worship system that they lived in, think about the temple. And I don't know how much you know about first century Jewish temple worship, but it was crucial to the way that they approached God. And even the layout of their temple indicated the sovereignty and the power and the holiness and the otherness of God. Because there were walls around the Temple Mount, and only certain people could even go into the Temple Mount. It was huge. It was huge, miles wide, okay, huge. But only certain people could go into those walls. And then within those walls, there were like different layers of walls. And then so beyond that, only certain other people could go be in those other walls. And you get into the actual temple proper, and once you're in there, only like priests could go into there. And then in the centralmost point of the temple, there was this place they called the Holy of Holies, the most holy place. And this is where they said the presence of God dwelt. And only the high priest, and only at certain times, could go into this most holy place. It was very well established that God is not someone that you're just flippant with. He's not someone you just casually dap up and give him some knuckle. Like this is not how they viewed God at all, okay? So I wanted you to picture this because then Jesus comes along and he starts talking differently about this God. In fact, one of the reasons that they arrested him and crucified him and some of the claims that some of the religious leaders were making was that he was committing blasphemy, which is kind of degrading the name of the Most High and maybe claiming a certain intimacy with him or things like that. And even in this sentence, another place, when he refers to God, he uses this word in Aramaic, that's the language he was most likely speaking. He calls him Abba. Abba, which is, we translate it father, but in English, we might have a more familiar word like daddy, papa, pa. To take this almighty being and to be so familiar with him that you might say, what's up, Pops? This is going to be like mind-breaking for the people listening to him here. And so, and he does it a lot. He just talks about his Father in this very familiar way. When Jesus says in John 14, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to my daddy except through me. It's not just a name for God, it's a description of a relationship that Jesus has with this Father. And he's actually inviting us into that same relationship. The road that I'm leading you down, the way, the path that I'm showing you is the road, listen to this, home. I'm preparing a place for you. There's a room for you. This is the guy who's going to recognize you in the dark. He's going to know your tendencies. He's seen you since you were a wee lad or a wee little girl and watched you grow up. This familial idea of him being your dad, that's where the road goes. I am the way, the truth, and the life. And no one comes to the Father except through me. I believe that this idea, this familiar, loving relationship with the Creator is what I think everyone's looking for. And I can't speak for all of you or everyone in the world, but it's very common actually to look at rich and famous people and see that they get everything in the world, but it's not enough. Can I tell you a couple of stories? One story is about Steve Jobs. How many of you have an iPhone, iPad, Apple computer, right? I mean, Steve Jobs was the founder of Apple computers, and you know, there's a battle between like Windows and Apple, or like Android and your iPhone. But I'm telling you what, none of the stuff we're doing today on our phones would be what it is if it wasn't for the innovations that Apple made in those early years. Things like a smartphone that has a touchscreen. It's the whole internet in your pocket. Things like the MP3. The idea that what if we made our music smaller and we could get like thousands and thousands of songs on one device? This all comes out of the mind and the concepts of Steve Jobs and his team. Here's the thing. I read his biography several years ago, and it's a sad book. The guy was a jerk, man. He was an absolute mean person. And I don't know what really came from that. I think there's a certain level of like, I don't know, that personality that sort of has to happen for these major minds to be who they are. And, you know, I'm not going to say Elon Musk's name or anybody like that, but people like, you know, these high, powerful minded, it's a certain level of a personality that maybe turns other people off, but there's a spiritual component to it too. There always is. And in his book, he tells the story of why he decided he didn't want to be a Christian. So he's 13 years old. Steve Jobs was actually adopted by a very nice family, and they took him to church, and he was, you know, exposed to Jesus, and he was exposed to church and the kingdom of God and things like that. But one day he was at home, and I think it was a Time magazine he got, and on the cover there was a picture of some starving children in Africa. And he was just like, that's so sad. Like, what's God going to do about these poor kids? So he talks to his parents about it, and whatever they said wasn't, you know, enough for him. So they said, why don't you go talk to our preacher about it? Let's go see. So he goes and he talks to the preacher, and he says, I got some questions, man. I'm wrestling. He's 13 years old. And he goes to him and says, I got a question for you. First of all, if I raise my finger, will God know it, that I raised my finger? And the preacher's like, yeah, God will know that. And he goes, okay. So he pulls out the magazine. He goes, well, does God know about this? And the preacher says, yeah, God knows about this. And he said, does he allow it to happen? And the preacher says, yeah, God allows it to happen. And I don't know how the rest of the conversation went. But what Steve Jobs said is, that is the day I decided I was not going to go back to church. I cannot believe in a God who would let suffering exist in the world. Have you ever been there? I have. Talking about the Myers family and foster care, just some of the situations you see and you're just like, what? And there's answers to that, and there's thoughts about God's sovereignty and you know, how much do we want God to intervene? You know, do you want him to every time, oh, that's too much calories, I wouldn't eat that. Like, how much? Where do we draw the line? Where do we draw the line where God does intervene in suffering in the world? Here's the thing, it's not up to you and it's not up to me. And so there's so much more we know about God's sovereignty and his goodness and his grace and his love that you have to say, I don't understand this, but what I do understand is this, so that is still the God I choose to believe in. Steve Jobs said, I don't want anything to do with that God. Now, he goes on to become one of the most successful people in history. He's going to be someone that long after he's dead and gone, people are going to see and use the innovations that he was part of. He had all the money in the world. And here's the thing. After turning his back on Jesus, he spent the rest of his life looking for spiritual peace. He gets really involved in Zen Buddhism. He spends a lot of time in India where he is like meeting with monks and learning how to meditate and going through all this stuff together. And he's trying to understand the spiritual nature. And he died not fully understanding all those things. I don't know his soul. I don't know everything that goes on behind the veil with someone like Steve Jobs, but what I do know is I think he wanted the same thing that Jesus is offering here. A Father who knows your name, who has a space for you. Something a little more contemporarily, and this list could go on and on and on. A very, very popular singer right now, Billie Eilish, one of the biggest names in the world. She is super famous, and she did it at a super young age. A couple years ago, she did something just that I don't think has been done before, or maybe she was the youngest person to ever do it. At the Grammys, which is like the greatest awards you can receive as a musician, she received the top 4 awards in the same night. Album of the Year, Record of the Year, Song of the Year, and Best New Artist of the Year. All in one night. This is monumental. Now, here's the thing. CBS was doing an interview with her later on, and they were just talking about it. And if you look at the album that she won all those accolades with, and if you know anything about her, this is a really dark album. It's pretty much all about depression and suicide. And so they asked her about that. Like, man, you're on top of the world. You're one of the biggest artists in the world. What is it that caused you to, write on about those topics? And again, I don't know Billy, and I'm not going to make any claims about her faith or her spirituality at all. But this is the quote from the interview. She said, well, I think she was 16 at the time. She was experiencing some fame, actually a lot of fame. And she said she was in a hotel room in Germany, and she just felt empty. And she looked at the window, and she said, I think I'd just be happy if I just jumped out of that window. She said, I had lost all of my friends except for one. I'd gotten so famous and so set apart that I just couldn't have community and I couldn't have friendships. And she said, so from that place is where I wrote this album. And she continues to be one of the world's biggest stars. And I'm not here to throw stones at someone like Billy, but instead of saying, man, we could pray for people like that, because it is hard to be on top of the world and not have people in their life. But I really think that at the heart of what she's saying is, you know what I really want? I want to wait to the Father. I want someone who knows me, who I can be known by, who gets me, even when other people reject me. And so that when I'm all by myself, my darkest thoughts are not suicidal and negative, but instead something different. On and on and on and on you could go with, and I'm picking on celebrities because it's relatable. We all get it. Some of these super major stars, and there's a little, Google it. find phrases by these super amazingly powerful and influential who had every door open for them people who at the end of it, I think it was Jim Carrey who said, I wish everybody could get rich and famous and have everything they want so that they could understand that that's not it. And he wasn't being a comedian in that sentence. So what do we do with that? I think that when Jesus speaks in John 16, he's actually answering the question. I am the way, the truth, and the life. And if you want to get to the Father, there's only one way to it, and that's me. And the problem with that is that it's a really exclusive claim. It's 8 billion people on the planet. Do you know how many religions there are and worldviews and things? And so when you look at what Jesus says, you're like, how dare he make such an exclusive claim? And I get it. It sounds arrogant. It sounds too narrow. What about them? What about them? What about this? What about that? We've got all these questions. But here's another way of looking at it. If you needed a specific surgery in your life, and you found the specialist for that surgery, I think about my mother-in-law. We just had a conversation last week, and she has to have some cataracts removed. And she had a doctor, and she was like, I'm not really feeling this doctor. I don't know about this doctor. I think I'm going to find another doctor. And my sister-in-law said, Mom, these are your eyes. You should, if you don't feel comfortable with your doctor, you should go find a different doctor. She wanted to find, because this is very intimate, and I want to find the specialist that's going to do what I need you to do. You want to go to the person who knows how to fix your problems. You don't want to go to some doctor and say, you know what, there's a lot of ways to fix eyes. People have tried a lot of things. I think maybe you should try more carrots. Have you tried more carrots? I would try with that. What you want to do is go to this public swimming pool, and you want to go underneath and hold your breath and keep your eyes open as long as possible. That'll do it. I've heard there was a study written on that. I would try that. You don't want some doctor that's like, I don't know, there's a lot of ways to fix your eyes. Just pick your way. Pick the way that feels better. No, you want the doctor that's like, yeah, I know how eyes work, and this is the way. This is the way to fix your eyes. You can either trust me or not, but this is the way, and I'm telling you. It's not that people haven't been searching for God. It's not that we haven't experienced a lot of world religion and a lot of worldviews. It's that every world religion and every worldview, I believe, is our attempt to climb a ladder towards peace. I'll put it this way. I believe it's our search for God. All of these. I heard it put this way. Religion is man's search for God. The message of Jesus is about God coming down to search for us. If there were a ladder in the way, and whether, I don't know what you want to use for your metaphor, getting out of the hole or getting out of my sin or finding peace or why ever we're climbing this ladder. Religion is us trying to climb that ladder, rung after rung after rung. Let me do the thing that makes me feel better or have my questions answered or understand the pain and the suffering in the world. Let me climb. And we will never get to the top of that ladder, and we don't have the strength to get up there. But the message of Jesus is this: you don't have to climb the ladder. I'm going to remove the ladder. I'm going to come down to you. That's who Jesus claimed to be throughout his whole ministry. And so he's sitting with these guys in this upper room on this last couple hours of his life. And Philip speaks up and says, this is verse 8. Philip said, Lord, show us the way to the Father, and that would be enough. Doesn't that sound like the same cry that I'm talking about? Just the path, where is it? And Jesus responds with something that should honestly stop us in our tracks. He says, this is verse 9. Don't you know me, Philip? Even after I've been among you for such a long time, anyone who has seen me has seen the Father. How can you say, show us the Father? Don't you believe that I am in the Father and that the Father is in me? Philip, you've been with me for 3.5 years. I've been saying these things. I've been alluding to this. I've never denied it. And here I am telling you straight up, you want to see the Father? Look at me. There's something in that exchange. I think Philip wanted some dramatic encounter, some big, amazing moment, some lightning bolt moment. And he almost misses the fact that the Father is actually right here with him. Do you know what Christianity believes about God and about Jesus? I want to say this because I think a lot of Christians don't fully even believe this. Christianity is the belief that Jesus is God in the flesh and that he showed us a way back to him. That's what Christianity is. If you think something other than that, that's not what Christianity is. That's as easy as I can say that. And the claims Jesus made, he begins to back up. He backs up his claims. I wonder if often we are waiting for that dramatic moment, that lightning bolt moment, and Jesus is like, don't you know me? I've shown myself to you so clearly. Verse 11, Jesus says, believe me when I say that I am in the Father and the Father's in me, or at least believe on the evidence of the works themselves. There's an entire applied science called apologetics. Do you know this word? It kind of means proofs. It's not new. It's not new. Jesus starts it right here. He begins the science of apologetics. Apologetics is part of, it's a legal word, basically, from I think Greek or Latin, and it kind of is like evidence, right? And so the idea is no one should really believe in Jesus just because someone said believe in Jesus. That's not why Jesus wants us to believe in him. People should believe in Jesus because there's proof, because there's evidence, because there's reason and logic behind us. He says, believe in the works themselves. The disciples had seen a lot. They had seen miraculous healings. They'd seen people fed, thousands and thousands of people being fed by as simple as 5 loaves and 2 fish. These are the stories we've been telling throughout the book of John for the last 6 weeks. A couple of days earlier in this story, Jesus had just raised their friend from the dead. Now, other people had done miracles throughout history. They had. Look at the prophets. Moses did miracles. Ezekiel was involved in miracles. There's miracles that have happened. God has done miracles for his people. There have been miracles. So it's not just that Jesus did miracles, so therefore he is God. He's actually setting them up for the ultimate expression of miraculous proof ever. He says, I'm going to raise from the dead. I'm going to give my life, and you wait 3 days, and I'm going to rebuild this temple, is what he calls it. He's talking about his body. I'm going to come back. I'm going to reunite with you alive so that you can know who I am. Jesus knew that the biggest piece of evidence was still yet to come. And some of the biggest evidence is these men listening to him. Do you know that right after Jesus was crucified, and I've said this over and over again, but I hope that you hear it today. In the moments after Jesus was crucified, his disciples desert him. He's now dead, and they're like, oh shoot, our leader is dead. What do we do? So they go into hiding. They're terrified. Because they're so closely associated with this man who was seen by those leaders as a problem that they feel certain, and it's going to come true later in the book of Acts, these same leaders are still going to come after these guys, that I'm going to be guilty by association. What they just did to Jesus, they might do to me next. So they go and they hide. The only thing that brings them out of hiding is after Jesus raises from the dead, and he appears to them. And he does things like he does for Thomas. And he says, I'm here. Touch me, share a meal with me. In fact, Jesus appears to over 500 other people. So much so that when Peter and John are arrested there in Acts chapter 4, just a couple of weeks later, the ruling council there is not saying that it didn't happen. They're not saying Jesus didn't raise from the dead. They're just saying, would you quit talking about it? It's making us uncomfortable. They said, will you please quit preaching the resurrection? The evidence is the resurrection. The evidence is the changed lives of these men who not only start following Jesus again and preaching him on every street corner after they see him alive, but every one of them to a man will die a martyr's death because of that belief. I mean, it's one thing if there's a group of 12 of us and we're like kind of trying to preach a lie, but then one of us gets executed for preaching that lie. It's one thing for us to be like, ooh, that was rough. Okay, maybe it won't happen again. And then the second one gets executed for that lie. And we're like, I'm starting to second guess how much I want to teach this thing. And then the third one gets executed for that lie. And we're like, okay, you know what? I'm done. The fourth one, all the way up to John, who wrote this book, who's the last one, and actually the way he was executed was by exile on an island. He has to starve to death. And he still believes that Jesus rose from the dead. Don't believe me just because I say it. Believe on the evidence of the works. And that's something we all have to chew on. Christianity isn't just a religion of winning arguments. It's not a faith of just being good and moral and making better decisions. It's living on the claim that God became man. He lived and died and rose again. And I now will call him Lord and Master and King. We're paddling. I cannot find this platform anywhere. We're looking at the map. We got no cell phone service. We're like, are we ever going to get there? I guess we'll sleep in our canoe. And then it finally happened. We look up and off on the edge of the shore, there was this little white PVC pipe sticking out of the water. I mean, like a little 2-inch pipe sticking up out of the water. And one of us looks over and goes, is that it? This is the first time we've seen that pipe. Is that it? So we paddle over to it. And I'm so frustrated at the people who put that pipe there, thankful and frustrated at the same time. It's a mixed emotion. When I pulled up and saw that on that pipe was painted or drawn in a Sharpie marker, a little red arrow. It was like, that way. And right behind that pipe was this little narrow, like, channel that went back into the creek back there, and we paddled into it, and then it opened up, and there was our platform. Whew. Were we frustrated that that was the only sign? Were we mad that someone, put it there and we didn't see it at first? Nah, man, we rejoiced. We got to that platform, we got up. I had the best ramen noodles I've ever had in my life. Ate all the rest of the trail mix, and I was ready to live on that platform forever. I mean, I'm like, we are here. This is home. Without the sign, without someone showing me the way, we'd have never found it. You get the point. You get the analogy. It feels good to finally find that place. And here's where I want to land today. One, if you're looking, Jesus is the way. If that frustrates you because it's too exclusive, I understand. It sounds arrogant. It sounds ridiculous. But lean in, because for thousands of years, people have been providing evidence, writing books on top of books. And there are so many books written by people who were atheists, who tried to prove Christianity wrong, and in the pursuit of proving it wrong, came to faith. I got a stack of books in my office just for that. The internet's full of those ideas. Yeah, there's other stories. People turn their back on God and Christianity, and that's just the way it goes. So it's up for each one of us to weigh the evidence and decide. But as for me, I've come to the place of going, like, I got a lot of questions for God. But one thing that's absolutely certain for me is that he loves me and he came to the earth to show it. And that through his resurrection, I too can have new life. So if you're looking for that, I want you to keep looking, keep paddling. I hope we can do a better job of putting signs in the water for you. I hope you can see transformed lives all around you. I hope you can see the evidence through our works, like the things we did like last week. We're not as concerned about having a cool, fancy service as we are saying, are we really being the hands and feet of Jesus? Are we going to do stuff? And how about the rest of us? Put out the signs, man. Do better than a PVC pipe in the water. Make sure that your friends and your coworkers and your neighbors know that you're different and why. Because we got a job to do. Jesus, as he was teaching the model prayer to his followers, he said, Father, let them see on earth as it is in heaven. On earth as it is in heaven. We're kingdom builders. Let your kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. One of our 5 core values at our church is that we want to be pockets of heaven everywhere we go. When you are full with his Holy Spirit, after accepting Jesus, you've been baptized in his name, you're living for, check this out. Remember how the temple structure was like, Jesus is in this little bitty space, God's here and you can't get there? That's not the way it is anymore. He actually places himself right in your life. I'm surrounded by dozens of temples right now. And you could take it home with you, and you could take it to work with you, and you could do it online, and you could be at your baseball game and your kids' soccer practice and wherever you go, and you are taking the presence of God with you. And guess what you are? A sign to the way, an introduction to the Father, helping people find exactly what they've been looking for. I've got a challenge for you this week. We always do this every week, and I hope this is something you can take home. I want to invite you to do something I'm just calling the signpost prayer. The signpost prayer, and this is it. Every morning, at least for this next 7 days, I want to invite you every morning this week to start your day with this prayer, with this one sentence. Father, help me be a signpost for someone else today. It'll impact how you drive your car, because you're pointing everybody to something. And if you're a jerk and you're mean, what are you pointing them to? It'll impact how you raise your kids. It'll impact how you treat your spouse. It'll impact what you do online when nobody's watching. Lord, help me be a signpost for someone today. Christianity isn't just facts about God. Jesus is the way to the Father. Let's pray.